talking with the experts.
Please welcome Jess Stuart for episode 273.
Yeah, they so do. And our comparison often comes from a lack of confidence in what we bring to the table. And starting our own business and showing up and being the face of that, launching new products, there's no greater breeding ground for this stuff to take hold than putting yourself out there. And when we have the confidence in what we bring to the table, we don't tend to look at other people and their tables. So I often say to people, the grass is greener where we water it. But it's easier said than done, right? Especially when you're looking around at everybody else going, well, they're doing really well and I'm not. And on social media, particularly for businesses, I mean, I love to follow people to try and learn from them, but often it leaves me feeling inferior because of all the amazing stuff they're doing. And then when you talk to them, they'll say things like, oh no, that program that I was selling for $10,000 a head, it didn't actually sell out. I just put that post saying selling out fast to try and encourage more people to book because I haven't actually got any bookings.
Are you a non-techie, introverted author, speaker, coach, consultant, or entrepreneur wanting to make an impact through podcasting? In 30 days working one-on-one with you, I can show you how to build authority and credibility for your business. I'm inviting you to shift your thoughts about podcasting and allow yourself to expand into the next level of your life and business by joining the Podcast Wizard 30-day program as I help you take your podcast from idea to launch. Find it at rose-davidson.com under the Work With Me tab.
Welcome to Talking with the Experts. This is where we discuss great ideas to take your business to the next level. How do we know these ideas work? Well, it's because we're talking with business owners who are using these ideas. Business owners who have years of experience and expertise. All things business by business owners for business owners. And now, here is your host, Rose Davidson.
Hello and welcome to Talking with the Experts. My name is Rose Davidson, your host from rosedavidson.com. Talking with the Experts is about all things business by business owners for business owners, and you can find it on all good podcasting streaming platforms and on YouTube. And today my guest is Jess Stuart. And we're going to be talking about Burnout to Brilliance. And Jess is an international speaker, coach and author of 5 personal development books specialising in mindset, performance and women in leadership. A well-known imposter syndrome expert with a background in senior human resources roles and a decade working in leadership development. So she is well versed in Burnout to Brilliance. Welcome, Jess, and thanks so much for joining me today.
Thanks, Rose. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so tell me firstly about your books.
Yeah, so Burnout to Brilliance is number 5. So, that's been a learning curve in itself. And I started writing books before I started my business, which is the wrong way around, I'm told. But it was a passion of mine and grew from wanting to, share a message. And those messages have evolved as my business has. And Burnout to Brilliance is the latest one. And it seems to have come at the right time, given what we've all been through over the last couple of years.
Absolutely, yes. So tell me how you came to write the book.
So books in itself, I started writing, I walked away from my HR career and I wanted to find a new way of helping people develop. I loved seeing people grow and develop. I didn't love working in the corporate world. So for me, writing books was a way of sharing that message direct with individuals and organizations in a way that helped. And Burnout to Brilliance specifically came off the back of not just my own burnout, but what I'm seeing in so many of my coaching clients is that the pursuit of high performance and the pursuit of brilliance is often our undoing, is often what's leading us to burnout. And so I wanted to really unpick that and discover a new way. If plan A isn't the way we do things, more, better, the hours, the hard work, then what does plan B look like? How can we be our best, but without burning out in the process?
Yes, it's always good to have a plan B. I don't have a plan B. I just rock on with plan A. If it goes down the shit chute, then I'm in trouble.
That's when you need to look for a plan B.
Yeah, probably. Sometimes I end up with plan Z though. So, it just keeps going and going and going. Now, you went and studied with Buddhist monks and nuns for a time. Is this where the idea for your book evolved from, or is it just something that came naturally?
Yeah, it was definitely born during that time. And I guess I went from one extreme to the other, because I went from a busy corporate role with the company car, back-to-back meetings, hotels, head office, to an ashram, meditating every day and cleaning composting toilets. And for me, it was the people psychology, what I'd learned in the Western world and as part of my HR career and working in leadership development, was then combined with this ancient Eastern wisdom. And for me, it was just so two different ends of the same spectrum that I was like, where's the middle point? Where can these two meet in the middle? How do we take the bits that work from both ends and put them together in a way that works in our modern world? Because let's face it, if we're a monk on a hilltop, then our chances of being Zen are vastly increased by the fact that we don't have to go to work, do the commute, get a credit card statement, all the stuff that stresses us out. So for me, it was, how do I put that together in a way that works for the realities of our modern businesses?
Yeah, it's the modern world has a lot to answer for, really, and sometimes I think that I'd like to go and somewhere retreat in the Himalayas or somewhere like that, and just chill and just run away from modern society, I think, and just live very simply. I thought maybe I might go back to colonial days, because I think that seemed to be a much more simpler life, but then I think, no, it was too much hard work.
Well, there is that, eh? And that's the beauty of it. Where's the balance? Where's the middle point? How do we take the principles of that stuff without having to go back there and do the hard yards?
Yeah. And where is that middle ground? I mean, how can we go about finding that, from being, totally stressed out in the corporate world, or even just owning your own business, to brilliant and finding that middle ground?
Yeah. And I think that was one of the aha moments for me. I walked away from the corporate world thinking exactly that, and was like, right, I'm going to start my own business, because then I've got freedom and autonomy to be my own boss. I'll work, 11 till 2, and I'll go to yoga at lunchtime. And then, of course, I ended up working more hours than I'd ever done in my life, trying to do everything, because all of a sudden you don't have marketing department and IT department, accounts, you are it. And was like, hang on a minute, this isn't working either. And I think therein lies the problem for so many of us in business. There's so much to do that there's never enough hours in the day, yet we always think that more is better. And this is a concept I talk about in the book, this difference between quantity and quality. When we're looking at quantity, which is what we've taught to do in the modern world, the more we do, the more we produce, the more effective we are. But at what cost? And how effective are we? Because if we're doing everything with a tired brain that can't focus, that makes mistakes easily, and if we're not at our best and we're presenting ourselves to clients, then you've got to question what the quality is of what we're producing. So it's this concept of less but better. It's doing the stuff that needs doing, the priorities well, rather than doing everything. And it's encouraging ourselves to be able to slow down so that we can speed up. If we slow down and take time out for ourselves and be at our best, then when we come to do our work, we can get more done in less time, because we're performing at a more effective level.
Yeah. So what do you advocate that we do to, slow ourselves down? And it's not always easy just to go and get a manicure or a massage, or, a lot of people can't afford it when they start their own business. So, I know you can go for walks, and, there are a lot of free things you can do. But, what if you've got kids and, you've got babies, and it can be quite a challenge, especially if you're a woman at home. I know there are dads that stay at home and do the same things, but we'll just put it in the women's perspective for the sake of argument.
Yeah, you're so right. And the book that I wrote before this one actually was called The Superwoman Survival Guide, for exactly that reason, that as women, we have so many things to do and such high expectations of ourselves that often we're juggling so many balls, one drops, or we're setting the bar so high we can't reach the expectations we've set. And I think it's focusing on the small things because they make the biggest difference and they're more doable. So it's like you say, it's unrealistic for us to often say, I'm going to take a day off and go to the spa, or I'm going to book a massage when things are busy. But it's the small things that make the biggest difference, and they don't have to take a lot of time or cost a lot of money. And I think for individuals, we're all different. So you're right, a walk can work for someone, but it's not going to work for someone else. So you need to know yourself what works for you. And aside from the nice stuff that we read on Instagram from all the wellness warriors, get a green juice in the morning, have a gratitude practice, do some journaling. Yes, all that stuff is good. But then there's the way that we can take control of our own business and our own schedule and our own routine. And that's about what we choose to prioritize. That's about how we structure our day. That's about how the routines that we follow, whether that be in or out of work, and whether we own our calendar or our calendar owns us.
Yeah, I think my calendar owns me.
And
But I often suffer with comparisonitis. At the moment I'm going through a bit of I've just launched a program and nothing's happening. So now I'm comparing myself to all these people I see, out there in social media land that are, selling their courses and doing this and doing that. And it's poor little me just sitting here, and I'm starting to feel like, am I doing the right thing? Why are they doing so much better than me? How do we in business get over that comparisonize and the imposter syndrome? Because honestly, those two things, though different, go hand in hand together, I feel.
Yeah, they so do. And our comparison often comes from a lack of confidence in what we bring to the table, and starting our own business and showing up and being the face of that, launching new products. There's no greater breeding ground for this stuff to take hold than putting yourself out there. And when we have the confidence in what we bring to the table, we don't tend to look at other people and their tables. So I often say to people, the grass is greener where we water it. But it's easier said than done, right? Especially when you're looking around at everybody else going, well, they're doing really well and I'm not. And on social media, particularly for businesses, I mean, I love to follow people to try and learn from them, but often it leaves me feeling inferior because of all the amazing stuff they're doing. And then when you talk to them, they'll say things like, oh no, that program that I was selling for $10,000 a head, it didn't actually sell out. I just put the post saying selling out fast to try and encourage more people to book because I haven't actually got any bookings. And that's the danger with comparison, right? We never see the reality. What we see is how shiny their website looks or what they post on social media. And of course, when we're comparing that to our lives, our business, we're seeing that warts and all because we're in it. And so we're never comparing apples with apples. So of course, we're always going to feel like we're falling short because we don't get that true comparison. And there's a lovely saying that confidence, when you walk into a room, when you have confidence, it's less about comparing yourself to others in the room and knowing what you bring into the room. And at that point, we stop comparing ourselves to other people. But I think that takes time, especially in our business. It takes time, it takes results, it takes ourselves to prove ourselves to ourselves often to lessen that voice.
Yeah, I think it's because this is my first program that I've actually had the courage to put out there. And so I'm thinking, is it going to work? Is anyone going to come?
Yeah. And the beauty of that is in business is if it doesn't, then great, we've learned something. I mean, I put on so many events when I first started out and no one would show up because I had no list. They were free events. I had no list. No one would show up, even though they were free. And I think, geez, I'm doing something wrong here. But I learned so much through that process about marketing, event management, list building. And now the events sell out and they're paid. And yet it was going through those failures that helped kind of, alert me to the bits I was missing.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it's all, no one fails. It's just a learning opportunity. And that's how I look at it. I think the word failure and fail should be taken out of the vocabulary because I don't think anyone really fails. I think they just have a lesson that they need to learn. And if you don't learn it, then obviously you're not a very good student.
Totally. Yeah, totally.
So tell me a little bit more about imposter syndrome. Now, I know there are many ways to get over it, and women more often suffer from it than men because, I don't know, men seem to have more confidence in what they do, or it's just in their makeup. I'm not really sure. But how, as women, particularly in business, get over this imposter syndrome?
Yeah, and it's interesting you mentioned the gender difference. The International Journal of Behavioral Science tell us that 70% of people suffer with imposter syndrome, regardless of gender. But I think it is attributed to women more often, potentially because we talk about it more. You know, men are less inclined to admit to those vulnerabilities, but men do seem more confident in the business space. And when you think about where we've come from and our history, women didn't ever used to own businesses. We're not allowed to run businesses. You know, it wasn't that long ago that we weren't even allowed our own bank accounts. So the fact that we are now running businesses and successfully in many cases, feeling like an imposter in this space isn't a surprise when you look at where we've come from and some of that cultural baggage that we still carry. But it's extremely common. It is the domain of high achievers. And I always say to people, that's its silver lining. So pay attention to that bit because it is the only bit that is the silver lining. The rest is all quite crappy. So the rest is us doubting ourselves, second guessing ourselves, not sharing ideas because we don't think they're good enough yet, not being the voice in the room because we're not sure that what we've got to say is important. We tend to downplay our achievements, wave away our success. We'll put it down to things outside of ourselves, like, oh, it was the team or it was just luck. They're just saying that because they like me. And of course, that leaves us feeling like we're not enough, we're not good enough, which further evidences this whole feeling of being exposed as a fraud, which imposter syndrome is.
Absolutely, yeah, no. I've received some really glowing or to me, they're glowing recommendations about my podcast. And I think, oh my God, was I at the same interview? But, you know, they make me feel so good because I think, you know, I didn't do a very good job or, you know, I'm not progressing as well as I would like. But, you know, 20,000 downloads is not a bad, you know, a lot of downloads. It's not the millions that some people say they get, you know, after their first 3 or 4 episodes, which I don't believe that really happens, but you know, I'll leave that to others to decide on that. But yeah, imposter syndrome is a big thing in especially in business owners. It's you know, but I mean, even in life in general, a lot of us still have this imposter syndrome where you're right, you know, we get a compliment and we don't know how to accept it, or you know, we keep looking at shiny objects and think of the next shiny thing that's going to come along and not really focused on what we should be focusing on. And so then when it doesn't work, then you think, oh, I really wasn't that good after all. And then someone will come and say something else to you. So what steps can we take, I guess, to alleviate ourselves from feeling like an imposter?
Yeah, there's a number of practical tools and strategies that I teach. And the ones that I keep going back to that are the most impactful and the most popular are around offsetting this negativity bias that we have in our brain. So you mentioned how, you know, it doesn't matter how many downloads you get, you'll always look at other people with more downloads and go, well, I'm clearly not that successful, as opposed to looking at the people that don't have as many downloads and going, well, actually, I'm top of the pile. And that's our negativity bias at play. You get one negative comment in a month, and even if you had 100 positive ones, it's that one negative that you remember and ruminate on, because that's how our brains are wired. And it's wired that way to protect us, so that when we're in a place of risk, we can protect ourselves by always scanning the horizon for the worst that can happen, which was great back in our cavemen women times, not so great now in our modern world. And of course, when our imposter is at play and it asks us that question, are you really as good as they just said? Or are you really supposed to be here being the face of your business and putting yourself out there? Who are you to be doing this? Of course, the brain looks for evidence. And what we do is stack up a whole heap of evidence in that negative corner that says, hey, here's all the things you haven't done or that other people are doing better. And we wave away and downplay all the positives. And so we don't get an even representation in the brain of reality. I often say it's like a clouded lens that we're looking through. And so one of the best ways of declouding that lens or seeing the reality is to acknowledge our successes, to know our strengths, to recognize our achievements. And so to do that, we need to be spending time every week, every day, reflecting on what's gone well. If you don't know what your strengths are, then ask people that know you well. If you reflect on what's gone well at the end of every day, you're offsetting that negativity bias, that you're flexing that muscle that'll train your brain to notice the good things. And what that does, life doesn't change. There's still going to be good things and bad things that happen in our business, but the way we look at it changes. We take off those lenses that are clouded and we see what is closer to reality. And of course, we've got to get comfortable owning that as well, because I think, particularly where I am in New Zealand, we are very modest and humble as a culture. And so we tend to fear that if we accept praise or acknowledgement, that we're going to be and rendered a narcissist shortly after.
Yeah.
So we tend to self-deprecate. And that, of course, adds fuel to this fire.
Yeah, we're much the same here too. I think, I mean, there is that tall poppy syndrome that we like to, to cut down tall poppies, but I think that's the fear of the unknown, because we don't want anyone to be better than we are. And, if they're up there on the pedestal too long, there's got to be something going on, something, that's not right. So, yeah, so we tend to cut the legs off from underneath them, which, it's not a very good thing to be doing, but we should be happy that they're up there. Anyway, I think, I did an exercise not long ago. I was doing a bit of market research for some copy, and I put on my profile, give me 5 words that you think describe me, and people wrote back the most amazing stuff. And I must probably print that out and put it on my wall and keep reminding myself when I'm feeling a bit like I am at the moment, what other people actually see me, how they see me. And I think that would stop that negative crap in my head.
Definitely, because that's the evidence, right? That's the validation. And weirdly, because we're human, other people's opinions carry more weight than our own. So it's really good to keep stuff like that and ask those questions. But we also need that constant reminder. It's almost like we're collecting evidence. So I have a little icon on my desktop and it's called my success folder. And anything that goes well, whether it's appearing in a magazine or feedback from a client, I pull into that folder. And then when I have those off days of feeling like I have no idea what I'm doing and I shouldn't be doing this, I can double click on that folder and all this evidence comes up that, you ask yourself when you're having those moments, well, what are the facts? And collecting those facts helps offset, it clears that lens, right? And offset our imposter to more align with reality, so that our confidence and our skills are closely aligned with reality as opposed to clouded by our self-doubt.
Yeah, I've heard people do similar things. They have a happy jar and they put all their happy memories in it and positive feedback and all sorts of things in it. And so when they're feeling particularly down, they dig their hand in and pick out a note and that, it's their sort of mantra thing for the day. So yeah, it's a good idea. I didn't laugh at it, but I thought, why would I bother? But yeah, you're right.
But the beauty of that as well, it's not just the warm fuzzies that you get when you pull the stuff out of the jar. It's you're training your brain every time you put something into the jar, you're training your brain to notice the positives, to accept and acknowledge the successes. So it's like flexing a muscle. Each time you add to that jar or to that folder or that journal, you are flexing that muscle in the brain that trains it to look for the positives. And we know it's really good at looking for the negatives. So we have to do way more work. It's like those guys that go to the gym and have really big shoulders, but really skinny legs because all they do is lift weights all day. And that's like our brain. It's got really skinny legs where our positive neural pathways are concerned. So doing things like that helps flex that muscle, helps build those neural pathways.
My friend's got a warm and fuzzy book, she calls it. So yeah, a warm and fuzzy journal. She writes good things in it. And so when she feels down, she looks in her warm and fuzzy book.
Nice.
So where can people find your books, Jess?
The website's the best place to go. They're all on there. It's jessstuart.co.nz.
Beautiful. And where can people find you if they want to work with you?
Website is also a good place. I'm also on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, all over the usual social media channels.
The usual. And do you have anything that you'd like to share with us, words of wisdom or some tip or hint?
I think I'd probably go back to where we started and say that often it's the pursuit of brilliance that leads us to burnout. And I think we need to start rethinking that. I think when we start to flip the narrative that more is not always better, it's less about the quantity of what we're doing and more about the quality. particularly when we're running our own business. And for me, I'm constantly reminding myself, why are you doing this? The reason I went into my own business is for freedom and autonomy. And if I'm going to give that away by working 12, 13-hour days, then what was the point? So how can you work smarter rather than harder in a way that still makes an impact and hits the bottom line and gets you the revenue that you're planning for, but doesn't burn you out in the process or leave you devoid of a life outside of business?
Just thinking about burnout, this is the last question I have for you. What are the signs of someone being burnt out, and what could they do to get over that?
Yeah, it's going back to a lot of that self-care stuff that we touched on, and that's different for everybody. So each individual knows what they need to fuel themselves. So I liken it to plugging a mobile phone in for charge. What's your equivalent of being plugged into the wall to charge you up? For some people, it's yoga. For other people, it's running, swimming, time with the kids. For other people, it's time away from the kids. We're all different. So you get to pick. But the signs to look out for when you've let your battery level drop too low at its early stages, and this is probably something most of us can identify with, it's a loss of energy. We're too busy to take breaks, a sense of overwhelm, maybe a lack of focus. And it escalates from there. But at its pointy end, at the end where it's really impacting us and we're probably getting sick at this point, you notice that you start checking out, withdrawing, just detaching, even from the things you enjoyed. So not necessarily just your work, but your family, your hobbies. You lose the motivation for pretty much everything. And the loss of hope comes in there too. And because that starts to impact on our sense of results, we get frustrated, resentful. There's often a feeling of guilt and this sense of, I'm not coping, life is unraveling. So it kind of, I have in the book 5 stages, and it gravitates from the, hey, I'm a bit tired and I've been working too hard, right through to, actually, I'm about to fall off my edge here, and it's too much.
Yeah, it is something to look out for, because burnout can cause a lot of mental illness, and can lead to mental illness, in fact. So they're quite significant signs to be looking out for, or get your family members or your friends to point things out to you when you're not feeling your best. I think that might be a good way to go as well.
Definitely. And seek help and support. If that resonates, then where is your intervention? I often say to people, it's like a traffic light system. When you're on green, you're at your best. And when you're on red, you've hit burnout. But there's that bit in between when you're on amber. It's like the fuel gauge coming on your car when it needs refueling. And for you what happens. For me, I get a sore throat and I get tired, even though I sleep well. And I get this twitchy thing in the corner of my eye.
Isn't that horrible?
We're all different, right? But we know those signs. And so if you know what your amber signs are, that's your warning light. And when you notice that happening, you need to intervene before you hit red.
Absolutely. Jess, it's been an absolute pleasure. And thank you for those great tips and hints and, things to look out for to keep ourselves in tip-top condition so that we can run our businesses.
It's a pleasure, Rose. Thanks for having me.
Bye for now.
You've been listening to Talking with the Experts, hosted by Rose Davidson. Make sure you have a look at our back catalogue over at talkingwiththeexperts.com. And be sure to subscribe to our podcast so you don't miss out on any episode. We look forward to your company next time. Talking with the Experts.